What do you think of the Trinity League's overall performance so far this year? Every week you probably look at these scores and what do you think?
In honesty, I don't even pay attention. I'm not saying that disrespectfully. Okay, I look at Corona Centennial, St. John Bosco. Once I know what they did, I say, all right, we got to take care of business. And it's no disrespect. I don't have time to worry about what other teams are doing. I'll see them soon enough.
Hello and welcome back to the Trinity League Football Podcast. I'm Dan Albano with the Orange County Register and OCVarsity.com, and I'm joined once again by my partner and Trinity League insider, Scott Barajas, as we're talking about the games coming up on Friday, September 22nd. There's two games on Saturday, September 23rd, and we're going to review the games from this past weekend of September 14th through the 16th. Scotty, how you doing tonight? And things are going to get really interesting this week. Once again, it's one more week before the league starts, and it's a nice finale with some intrigue.
Yes, it is. We're going to find out, where a lot of these teams stand if they start to separate from each other. We learned a lot last week. We're going to learn a lot more this week, so it'll be a good one.
Absolutely, and I want to welcome, Scotty and I both want to welcome all our Trinity League listeners to the Trinity League Football Podcast. We appreciate you spending some time with us on the podcast as we try to delve deeper into the strongest high school football league west of the Mississippi. The league's record so far, non-league, is very impressive. Let's see here. They are, I think they are 29-1. Is that right, Scotty?
Is it up? It was 23-1. It might be up to 29-1. I just know there's only one loss. Yeah.
Well, I think it's 23-1. 23-1, something like that. The only one loss, of course, is St. John Bosco. The voice that we introed our show, that was, again, modern day coach Bruce Rawlinson, who had some interesting comments that I'm going to ask Scotty about those comments that he was talking about the Trinity League and some of his perspective. Perfect thing right up our alley. But before we get to that, let me set the table a little bit on our show today. We're going to review last week's games with our grades. We are going to talk about some of the players of the week from the previous set of games. We are also going to preview this week's games, which there are some dandies that we're going to be talking about coming up this weekend. And we're going to end the show with a very nice insight here from Scott Barajas, our Trinity League insider, who's going to attempt and successfully pull this off. He's going to be ranking each of the Trinity League teams by their physicality. And as we know that the margins separating these teams could be pretty small at the end of the year, and this could be a very important ingredient, is who's the most physical. Maybe that will be the decisive factor. Maybe it's special teams, maybe it's going to be somebody outscoring, maybe it's going to be defense, but I think this physicality is something very interesting to look at. So let's get right into it, Scotty. And the game I want to start with is this past Saturday, and that was the Mater Dei victory, the Saturday night game down at Mission Viejo. Mater Dei rolls 62-14 against Bergen Catholic, a nationally ranked team, the best team out of New Jersey. Mater Dei's defense showed up big time in this game because the only touchdowns that Bergen managed was a fake punt, which was an outstanding play in the first half, and then they scored in the final seconds of the game, and they really were shut down. And of course, the big story was the return of Amon-Ra St. Brown to Mater Dei, who just went berserk in the first half with 9 catches for 147 yards and 3 touchdowns. All 3 touchdowns were spectacular, but the last one was about a leaping 30-yard reception from J.T. Daniels, who, by the way, threw 5 touchdowns, but he outjumped 2 players and out-wrestled them for the ball as well. That was spectacular. And then he also made a jumping catch at the side of the end zone. Pretty much got a ball that was out of bounds, but he kept his feet in bounds. But what did you think of the Monarchs in terms of your grades, Scotty?
I mean, they put on a show all on all phases, and with the exception of the little hiccup where getting kind of blindsided by that fake punt, but they got the A on offense and the A on defense, but Mater Dei basically shocked Bergen Catholic, and Bergen Catholic was talking about how physical they are, that Mater Dei hasn't played a New Jersey team. New Jersey teams are physical, and that they were going to be in for a game, but that was put to rest basically 2 series in, as Mater Dei punished them early, with multiple big hits, and it ended the evening with 5 sacks. They had 2 picks. They had the 1 pick by Mace Funa for pick 6. Elias Ricks got another one at the end of the game. And then, with Amon Ra coming back, that was the offensive highlight, getting him back, into the offense. And then JT was the normal JT, but the tone was set when Chris Street blocked the punt.
Yeah.
2 plays later, it was 7-0. And Bergen just, wasn't as tough, as physical as MD to keep up with, but, Mater Dei just had too much for them to handle. And, Bergen head coach Nuzo Campanelli was quoted, and this is his quote, "Better than advertised." Campanelli told the NewJersey.com newspaper, "I've coached against some really good teams, and I think that was the best team I've ever coached against. They were very complete, very physical on defense, and they dominated the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball." So, that was, I think they came into that and weren't expecting that, and then they came away seeing what Mater Dei is. And, I want to say this, and this is kind of interesting, but Bergen is probably comparable to the 4 other Trinity League teams. So that's kind of interesting to see, what looms, down the road. And they kind of reminded me of maybe a Santa Margarita, but with a little bit maybe more athletes, if that kind of gives you kind of a sense. But they were very well coached. They, they'll do well where they're from, but Mater Dei just had too much that night.
All right. Well, I'm going to revisit that comment here shortly. Warming up for Mater Dei, on Saturday night was St. John Bosco, and they put the thump down on Dorsey, 69-14 at Mission Viejo High School. This was a real impressive offensive game, obviously, as the points suggest for the Braves. They threw 6 touchdown passes in this game between Real Mitchell and a promising sophomore DJ, and I can't even pronounce his last name, Ugalele. He threw 2 touchdowns. Real threw 4, so there's your 6. They combined for 400 yards passing, and then St. John Bosco also ran for almost 200 yards. So they were pushing 600 yards total offense. But this is what we expected from the Braves. But there's been some questions about their offense. This isn't a great Dorsey team, but it was a good offensive day for the Braves.
Yeah, they were able to display all their tools. I think it was 35-0 after the first quarter, but they were just putting big play up to big play. And defensively, Bosco also got 2 defensive scores with the recovered fumble by Court Williams for a score, and then an interception by Kadron Williams, who then pitched the ball to Jalen Woodby, who actually ran it in for the other score. And then it also was the season debut for stud defensive lineman Sal Spina, returning from his knee injury from a year ago, and he actually had a sack and a couple of tackles in this game. So it's good to see, having him back, is going to bolster that defensive front. But you can only hope for, the one not so bright spot, I guess, is that you want to come away with these games, blowout games, injury free. And there was a report that their third string quarterback was injured. He had a knee injury, and then nickelback Paul Williams was taken off, was seen leaving on a stretcher with an internal injury, and so we hope he's okay. But other than that, Bosco, put it to Dorsey.
And what were your grades, Scotty? A's across the board for?
Yeah, A's across the board because they basically did everything they needed to do in that game.
All right. Let's another big, the big OCVarsity game of the week last week was Servite Villa Park. This was the home opener for Servite Friars at Cerritos College. Servite impresses 47-14 against Villa Park. So much more separation for Servite this year against Villa Park than last year. It was relatively close at halftime, 20-7 in favor of Servite, but then they outscored them 27-7 in the second half. Servite threw three touchdowns. TJ McMahon threw 3. Wasn't a high completion percentage for him, but he hit on some touchdown passes. And Servite ran the ball well, led by David Hernandez, who ran for 84 yards. TJ McMahon looking like a good dual threat. Also rushed for 2 touchdowns, so he had a total of 5 touchdowns. And 2 interceptions by a couple of juniors that Mater Dei obviously knows. Fine junior defensive backs. Titus Toller had a pick 6, returned 38 yards for a touchdown, and Trent McDuffie, who Steve Fryer was telling me that he was really impressed with. Steve Fryer covered the game for the Register. He also had an interception. What's your grades for the Friars on this big win?
I gave Servite a B on offense and the A on defense. Villa Park, was feeling that upset after jumping out to that early lead, but it was short-lived because Servite came roaring right back, and then they dominated pretty much the rest of the game. And the Servite's defense set that tone that they limit Servite to 140 yards of total offense, and they had the picks like you had mentioned earlier by Toller and McDuffie. They didn't get a good, strong passing game, but they were efficient, completing, three of those 5 completions went for touchdowns. Servite cut the penalties down. They had 5, so their lowest output on the year. So that was great to see, and the coach was commended them for it. But that's pretty much what Servite did in that game.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and that's a good point because that was a very big point of emphasis on our OCVarsity coverage pregame of that game. A lot of talk about the penalties, and we talked about it here on the Trinity League Football Podcast. So thank you for following up on that. So what were your grades for the Friars then, Scotty?
I gave them the B on offense and the A on defense.
Okay, got it. All right, now. Jay Serra, I want to move to the Jay Serra game. They hit the road, went out to Vista Marietta, and they won 26-9. So a certain guy here on the Trinity League podcast has been kind of hammering the Lions about not playing any defense. That would be me, and saying that they really need to show improvement. They haven't been showing improvement. Maybe Jay Serra has been listening to the Trinity League Football Podcast. Hopefully so, somebody with the Lion Nation. But obviously, 26-9 victory for Jay Serra. They moved to 4-0, just like Servite's 4-0 and Mater Dei's 4-0. Bosco, we know, is 3-1. But great defense by the Lions because Vista Marietta, had a safety. So Vista Marietta really only scored 1 touchdown in the fourth quarter. So a lot of progress to go along with all those points that they've been scoring. So I think this is a big, big step for Jay Serra. What were your grades on the Lions in this victory against the Vista Marietta Broncos?
I gave them a B on offense, and they finally got the A on defense. For the first time in 3 weeks, Jay Serra's defense actually makes the headlines.
Yeah.
In this victory, beating up on Vista Marietta. But it was plagued by a sloppy game because Jay Serra's offense had 4 scores taken off the board because of penalties.
Wow.
So despite that, this final score, they could have actually had more. But Vista was only down 14-9, I think, with 5 minutes left in the game, and then Jay Serra scored 2 touchdowns in the last 4 minutes of the game to give them some breathing room. So it was tight there for a while. But Vistas has only scored a total of 34 points in their 4 games. So you kind of got to take that with a grain of salt. But
right, true.
But at least Jay Serra didn't because last week I think Vista scored 20 last week. So they were starting to
against Orange Lutheran.
So they were they were down 7-2 at the half. Their lone 2 points came on a block punt, and the ball just rolled out at the end zone. That's how they got their 2 points. But Jay Serra kept their composure and battled through it and came away with the win.
All right. Now moving on to 2 more games to get to from last week. want to go to Orange Lutheran. This is a game that Scott Barajas also attended. He was doing double duty in the Trinity League last week, checking out Mater Dei and Orange Lutheran. Now, the Lancers played their first game in Orange County, played over at Orange Coast College, and they came away with a 41-28 victory against Norco. 41-28, kind of an interesting score because after the first quarter, Norco was up 7-0. So then Olu scored 21 points in the second quarter, took the lead, but it was still, it was 28-14. It was 27-21 in favor of Orange Lutheran going into the fourth quarter. So this game was kind of tight all throughout. The Oregon commit from Norco, the running back, I believe it's Travis Dye, ran for 150 yards on 23 carries, so he got going pretty good. But Orange Lutheran goes to 4-0 as well. Still got some, obviously got a big production continually from Helinski, the fine junior quarterback who was offered just days earlier by Northwestern out of the Big Ten Conference. But Scotty, you were there firsthand. We should go right to you. What were your grades on the Lancers?
I gave them a B on offense, and everyone's going to say how when they threw 421 yards. Well, I'll explain. I'll get down to that, in a minute. In their defense, I'm going to give them a C. There's other reasons for that too. Norco basically, had many chances to score, make this game a little bit more interesting. As we said, they kept it close, but you could say was it Orange Lutheran's defense that came to play? It was a combination of both, but we're gonna have to read between the lines on this one, we'll start with Olu's, the offensive guys. They have an excellent core skill guys with Ford, Logan Loya, JoJo Hawkins, and Strong on offense, but beyond that, they don't have much else. They're just not a physical team, and I'll get more into that later.
Okay.
You could see it on the field because Norco played with Olu for a quarter, kept the game close, like we said, 21-14 at half. Then Olu just seemed to play without any urgency. But then when they wanted to, they could throw the ball at will. And Norco's secondary was pretty bad. I mean, they had corners that looked like they've never played the game before. They were just overmatched. And you thought Olu would run away with it, but then Norco would come right back. Norco scored on a 4th and 10 with a 40-yard pass to tie it at 21, and then it pretty much stayed that way to the third quarter, until Olu scored 3 consecutive touchdowns to make it 41-21. And it appeared that they weren't gonna. Olu didn't want to blow out Norco. I mean, they kept on trying to run the ball, and their running game wasn't as effective as you would think. But then when they needed third down, they would throw when they would get it. So their throwing and passing game is great, but they just didn't seem to be a very physical team. But one player that's going to probably emerge is Loya. Logan Loya is
you've been high on him.
Time. He's
big time. Okay.
9 caught a lot of balls. But Loya seemed to be the deep threat, and he seems to have wiggle. I mean, he pulled away from defenders, zigging and zagging down the field. And then also this also noteworthy that Loya also started at corner over Joseph Forrest. So I don't know what that was about. And then Joseph Forrest came back and played the whole second half at corner, but it was kind of interesting. And defensively, I think their linebackers are their strength. Jackson Cloyd and Zach Brogdon played well, making most of their tackles, but it's obvious that their 1-14 record of their opponents is starting to rear its effects. Norco was probably the best team up to date, and Norco was not very good. And I don't know. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens with this week with Olu taking on Heritage. Because their offensive and defensive lines are small comparison to everybody else. Just have to see what happens from here on out.
Do you one question before we leave Jay Sarah and the Norco game? Did you see Thomas Huff, the recent Jay Sarah transfer at Orange Lutheran?
I did not see him I didn't see him suited up, or he wasn't listed in the roster. I don't think he had a number.
Okay. All right, maybe he's doing the sit-out period. All right, the last game, it was the first game of the week last week. It was on a Thursday. Santa Margarita taking on Mayfair over at Laguna Hills High School. And this was another game that was close after the first quarter. Santa Margarita was up by 4 points, but they went on to win 49-3 over Mayfair. So it was 7-3 Santa Margarita after the first quarter, and then they just poured it on. Santa Margarita also goes to 4-0, joins that 4-0 group. So what do you think? What did you feel about this game, where Scotty, where you had Santa Margarita? Josiah Norwood had another very good game passing, threw for 246 yards and a touchdown. Chad Magyar ran wild again. Same with junior Jake Thomas. So Magyar ran for 195. Jake Thomas, hit 92. Josiah didn't run too much in that game, but right there, Santa Margarita's rushing for over 300 yards, 250 yards passing. So then they're approaching 600 yards of offense, just like St. John Bosco. But what were your grades on the Eagles, Scotty?
I gave them A on offense, A on defense, and Santa Margarita has continued its fast start. They're putting up the points fast and often. It's ever since they had that scoreless second half to Loyola, they've just clicked, and they've been a different team. They're the ever ready, steady. Chad Magyar's leading that charge, and like you said, he's been consistent at the 100-yard mark, and he finally exploded for almost 200 yards. And I think Mayfair never really threatened to score. They were able to get the 3 on the board to lose the shutout. The Eagle defense was led by Caden Fitch. He had 8 tackles, and the Eagles also recorded 4 sacks and 2 by sophomore lineman Logan Schwenke, who also had 6 tackles. So the Santa Margarita has the big game this week, and we'll get more to that later.
Yeah.
But it seems to be that they're on par to every week you want to improve, and they seem like they've been improving every week.
Yeah. One brief comment I thought about with Santa Margarita. Obviously, I was blown away, once again impressed by Mace Funa at Mater Dei on Saturday night. Had a great night. The junior linebacker, he's a transfer from Santa Margarita. Of course, we know about the McLean brothers from Santa Margarita now at J. Sarah. Munar McLean's another junior. He's a speed burner, tall, 6'3" target. His brother Abdul Malik is a speed defensive end, not the biggest defensive end. He might be more of an outside linebacker. He's a UCLA commit, but he's got some serious speed, and he's a threat. And on the corner, what if Santa Margarita had Mace Funa, and what if they still have the McLean brothers?
That is interesting. The one thing that, I've talked to my football buddies about this too, about Funa being at Santa Margarita. They didn't even use him on defense last year. They used him at tight end. So everybody was kind of perplexed on the deal on that.
Yeah.
And he never got going, and he never he's not the player that we saw last year, the player he is now.
I know we talked about that on the show, and I'd ask you. I remember asking you, and what did you see, from Mace Funa? I think it was at the Mater Dei Santa Margarita. I was asking you, report, and I wrote today, Scotty. I think Mace Funa is the best. He's the most impactful defensive player I've seen this so far in Orange County, and I saw Christian Lavelle at Mission Viejo. He's excellent. He's a tackle machine, and I've seen a lot of Solo. At Solomon at Mater Dei, and of course I saw a lot of Elijah Griffin. He's a great corner, at Mission Viejo, and I've seen the rising sophomore at Laguna Hills, Jacobo. But from so far what I've seen, Mace Funa is the scariest guy walking around in defense right now in Orange County.
And I totally agree with that. He's been every single game. He's had some multiple plays where he's altered changing the game, whether it be a turnover, and even when he hasn't made the play, he's either made a hurry or a rush or made the quarterback scramble. He's been, I would have to agree, that by far the top defensive player so far.
Yeah. Now, briefly, before we get to our players of the week, Scotty, I wanted to ask you about the quote where we, from Bruce Rollinson, where I asked him after the game last week about, Coach, what do you think? I mean, if you notice these Trinity League scores that are coming back every week, so impressive from the league, what do you think of the league overall? And he said, no disrespect to the Trinity League, I check out the scores of Bosco and Centennial, and then I say, okay, let's get to work. We got to get things done. And I just don't have time to look at all the other, no disrespect, I don't have time to look at all the other Trinity League teams. We'll get to them soon enough. I was a little bit surprised because I think the Trinity League's doing so well that it'd be hard not to be like, wow, Santa Margarita is doing so well. They seem to be getting better every week. Wow, this seems to be up year for Servite. Those athletes with Helinski seem to be getting going at Orange Lutheran. And Jay Serra's playing some defense now, and I know how good Matt Robinson is. I was just surprised he didn't say something like that rather than he gave, he mentioned Bosco and he mentioned Centennial. And, of course, I understand why. But he knows the league, how I think the league's going to be – I still think the league – maybe they're, Mater Dei and Bosco are out there, but the way this team, the other teams are playing, and the fact that you're going to have to play 5 consecutive weeks on the road, I still think the way these other teams are playing, it's still not going to be a cakewalk for Mater Dei or Bosco.
No, you're right, and I agree. I'm kind of surprised that he did say that, but I know where he's going with that, and it actually plays into our second part of the podcast about the physicality, and I know that's where what he's thinking, and I can allude more to that when you can bring this back up again.
Sounds good.
Explain on why I think why you went there with that. So.
All right, excellent stuff, Scotty. Sounds good. Well, hey, before we get to our games coming up for this weekend, starting with Friday, September 22nd, Scotty, why don't you give us a couple of your players of the week, and I will add on if we need to fill any spots or if I have anything to add on some players of the week.
Start up the top. Mater Dei was the return of Amon St. Brown. I mean, he put 9 up for 47, and that was just in the first half. Of course, Mace Funa with his pick six and his sack and fumble, and then they recovered the fumble in the end zone for a score. We got Bosco. Actually, Josh Delgado actually had 4 catches for 123, 2 touchdowns. I mean, but everybody was all over the field. Defensively, basically their entire defense. As Dorsey didn't actually get to do anything in that game. We're gonna go. At Jay Serra, I didn't have anybody for either of those 2 games. I don't know if you wanted to fill anybody in there.
Yeah, I didn't find much info on that game.
And Orange Lutheran, I'm going to go Logan Loya. And then defense was Jackson Cloyd. And Servite, TJ McMahon keeps to be steady. He didn't have a good passing night, but he's the man that runs that offense.
Right.
Defensive, I mean, it could have been anybody. I'm going to go Titus Toller with it. He got his pick 6.
Right.
And Santa Margarita, Chad Magar once again. And defense, we got a new one in Logan Schwenke with his 2 sacks and 6 tackles. All
right. Good one. Those are all good picks, and congratulations to all those guys. All right, Scotty. Well, let's look at this week's games. We're going to start on the Friday here. Servite, after having that big showdown against Villa Park, now they're going up to Garfield, up in Garfield of Los Angeles, city section team. Garfield is 1-3. This is by far the weakest team they'll play all year, and it's nothing like Norco or American Fork from Utah or Roosevelt from East Vale in the IE or Villa Park. This is a crazy weak game. It's going to be a rout. There's not much to say. They even Servite has a bye after this one. Like most teams, right? So they're going to, before they open with Jay Serra. But what do you think of this game?
Yeah, it's a 1-3 Garfield, and basically Servette's going to get 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Basically, 2-week bye on this game as, the running clock's going to be in effect. They'll be done by half. Garfield, their only win is a 39-36 over a Montebello. And then since then, they've lost 3 straight to Shearer, Harvard, Westlake, and Crenshaw. So if that gives you any idea, this game will be over quickly.
Exactly. Now here's a really sneaky game good this week. I don't know if people is on their radar, and I think this is going to be the game I'm at, and I'm excited about it. But it's going to be Los Alamitos playing at J. Serra on Friday. So I think, I covered these guys last year, and they played a barn burner game at Veteran Stadium. Los Al has already took a big route, pretty good route to Long Beach Poly, who is outstanding. They had some problems with Matt Kolar, the Florida commit. Poly's good. I saw them against Mission. They got a lot of athletes. But Los Al, I kind of feel like they need a statement game big time before they get it, at some point this year, before they get their big showdown with Edison. I got to believe that Jay Serra is going to point to this game. I believe it's going to be the season debut of fine junior running back Keanu Norman, who hasn't played this year. He's the go-to guy on the Los Al offense. We can see, so that could be a good matchup for the Jay Serra defense. But what do you think of this game?
Yeah, this could be more intriguing than we originally thought. Los Al's no slouch. They actually hung with Long Beach. I mean, at least from a scoreboard point, 28-10. And since then, they've throttled Lakewood and Banning. Yeah. And despite, Jay Serra's defense coming alive, I'm not so sure that Jay Serra can duplicate another gem. They're going to need more offensive punch. They're going to have to pick up the pace again, which I expect them to do. But it may be challenging. They just can't have another multiple, penalty game like last week and having scores taken off the board, because that's going to be very crucial in this one, because Los Al's way better than Vista Marietta. I'm going to stay with Trinity League and go with Jay Serra on that one. But I wouldn't be. I mean, Los Al has played the perfect game in order for them, for them to take down Jay Serra. So.
All right. So that would be a Servite getting to 5-0. Jay Serra could be getting to 5-0. Does Orange Lutheran go to 5-0? They take on Heritage of Romo Land, another IE team. They're back at Orange Coast College. Helinski is going to be the quarterback's going to be singing the national anthem on homecoming. He's a multi-talented guy. That's got to be a good omen in this game for the Lancers. But Heritage is 4-0. They're from the Sunset Belt, the Sun Belt League. Again, Inland Empire. They're Division 2, so they're the same division as Norco. Statistically, and you've documented it well and mentioned it, Scotty, Orange Lutheran hasn't played anybody with a great record. Their record, as we said, it's like about 1 and about 14, the combined record of their opponents. Now they're taking on a 4-0 Heritage team. This is the best team they've played so far. I think this is better than Norco. So what do you say, Scotty, of this game?
Yeah, Heritage, people ask, where the heck is Heritage from? Well, they're actually from Menifee, which, if you're wondering where that is, it's at the base of the mountains as you head into Big Bear. So as you start heading up that hill, so it's pretty way out there, and they're the number 3 ranked team in Division 2, and they're coming off of 49-29 win over East Valley Redlands. Prior to giving up 29 points, they had only given up 17 in the 3 games. So, but the concern is that they gave up 370 passing with 200-yard receivers. So you got to watch that one. And that's going to be, an interesting to watch, because this is going to be their final non-league game before they take that bye, and then they open up with Bosco. So, will the athletes prevail? I don't know how Heritage is, how physical, they are. I know they have, some pretty good skill guys, so it may be a skill to skill. I'm still going to go with Orange Lutheran pulling this out, but I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be it'll be tight, a tight, contested game much like the Norco game, and then maybe Oilers might break it open. But I think Oilers, ends up coming out on this one.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this Heritage is the team that San Clemente played last year at some point, I think, in the playoffs on their run to the state title. I want to say that they were in that division, so they're very good. I think they moved up from, they must have been Division 3 last year, but this is, like you said, it's no joke, and I will check on that score as I'm doing right now. Let's see. Do we have anything else on Friday? Well, we've talked about Servite. We've talked about Orange Lutheran, J. Sarah. So yes, the big game on Friday night before we get to the Saturday games. So yes, the big game, probably the OCVarsity game of the week. Santa Margarita playing host to Mission Viejo. This game is going to be on Friday at Trabuco Hills High School. So people are probably wondering, well, why is Santa Margarita playing there? Well, the Saddleback College has got renovations going on, and so they're a bit of a homeless team in terms of the stadium. So that's why they're at Mission Viejo. So you got the Diablos coming off this very intense, defensive, gritty 12-7 victory against Long Beach Poly, kind of their public school rival. Now they get their South County rival, Santa Margarita. It's going to be by far the toughest team they've played. They're going to see athletes and a capability of teams that they haven't seen. They're going to play a very physical Diablo team that's going to be likes to get physical and rough. They're going to see some athletes and some Kelly Arnold is a pretty tough and fast running back. Obviously going to see Austin Osborne, 6'3" target. Elijah Griffin going both ways. Chris Mitchell, the best, some of the best cornerback, probably the best cornerback tandem in Orange County. But as we know, Santa Margarita likes to run it. They got the special teams. Their defense is getting stops. I think this could be a pretty good game. What do you think, Scotty?
Yeah, it's going to be their measuring stick by far. Early in the season, preseason, I think the Eagles were picked last in the preseason rankings. Nobody talked about them. Yet they've been probably the most consistent of the four teams. But again, their wins haven't been against really, really dominant teams. I think somebody had mentioned that they were their combined record, I have to double check on that, is 10-2. But I think those 10 wins are against a lot of those teams weren't very solid strength, strong teams. But the schedule, it's at this point, it's hard to gauge how good the Eagles really are, and they take on a Mission team that's coming off a physical, hard-fought game against Poly, that was decided by that, Griffin's pick. Like you said, you've talked about that game numerous times that Mission Viejo's, is no slouch and that they fly around the ball. At first glance, I think I was going to, go with Mission Viejo, but if you go off of last year's game, I think Mission Viejo dominated Santa Margarita last year. And, I think this game is going to be more challenging. I think it'll be, the matchup within the matchup, is going to be the physical defense being able to contain Norwood and bottle up, Magar. And then Mantelli's going to have to get more touches. He's been silent the past two games. He hasn't really needed to touch the ball, and they haven't have to use his big playability. But they're going to have to get him the ball as much as possible. And the other thing is this is going to be Josiah Norwood's first big time games. He hasn't played in these big, against these bigger Division I teams. They're much faster, they hit harder, they're more physical. So that's going to be something to watch for as well. So I've been liking Santa Margarita each week a little bit more and more, and I'll get to more on the Eagles in a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mission pulls this out. So.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned about the hitting, because I have been impressed with the last 2 weeks of the hits that Mission has been delivering. They hit, they almost knocked Corral out of the game. He did have to limp off at one point, and they hit him again another time, and That's a big reason why, as we know with high school football, when you start hitting the quarterback, that's when you start to see the 4 interceptions, right, Scotty? I mean, it's not a surprise on those. In a game that he got picked 4 times, he took some big hits, and that's a big reason why. They have great defense, and they're having a lot of schemes. There's a lot of sophistication to what Mission's doing on defense. I can even give one quick story what they were doing with, like, Christian Lavelle, who was playing outside linebacker. They walk him up that she shows blitz to on Corral. And it's going to be Corral's backside, so you can picture him walking up like he's going to blitz. So Corral checks down and throws the screen, thinking the blitz is going to come, and Lavelle doesn't blitz, and he covers that the running back out of the backfield, and then he tries to throw to the spot that Lavelle vacated, and the timing's just not there. It's just a lot to do for a high school quarterback. So there's a level of sophistication that Mission plays with on defense. They're physical, and I think you're right on. This is a big step up for Norwood.
We'll have to, that'll be the matchup within the matchup, so we'll have to see.
All right, so Saturday games, Scotty. Mater Dei going up to Santa Clara, taking on St. Mary's of Stockton. St. Mary's been one of the better teams up in Northern California, but the word I'm getting is that Mater Dei's got another lopsided victory on their hands here.
Yeah, it's they're 3-1. They're coming off of a 42-21 win over Consomma's Oaks last week, but I guess that they were 0-3. So and then they're bounced back from the previous week where they were upset 20-7 to a Central Catholic team. And St. Mary's, the read on them is they're a solid team, but they actually lost their quarterback, I think, in the first game, and he's been out the past 3 weeks, so we're not sure what his timetable is, and so they've taken their athlete, running back, receiver, and put him at QB, and he's not a passer, so they haven't thrown the ball very well. So this is going to be a challenge for them to try to keep up with Mater Dei, but look for MD to move through St. Mary's and then get ready for league play in 2 weeks. I mean it was supposed to be a great contest going up to that Levi Stadium, and
right.
Hopefully they can still have fun with it, but you never want to take anybody lightly. You just want to come in and take care of business in that first half, and then try to get out. So we'll see what the Monarchs end up doing to St. Mary's.
All right. And last game is also on Saturday. Is going to be St. John Bosco back east in Washington, D.C. They're playing on campus at St. John's of Washington, D.C. This is an afternoon game, 2 o'clock. Interesting, I talked to the Braves because I saw them on Saturday at Mission Viejo. They are again leaving early for this game. They're taking a red-eye after practice on Tuesday, so they'll get Monday and Tuesday practice in. They'll hit the red-eye, but they're also going to make this an educational trip for the Braves. They're going to see, obviously, a lot of the sites in Washington, D.C. for the kids with obviously all the U.S. history and U.S. government sites. They're also going to take in a baseball game is the word. They're going to see Baltimore Orioles playing the Devil Rays. I think they got I don't want to get the name wrong, but there's a St. John Bosco alum on one of those teams between the Braves, between the Devil Rays, Tampa Bay Rays, and the Orioles. And so they're going to see that game, and then they're going to play on campus against St. John's. What do you think of this game on Saturday, Scotty?
Yeah, St. John's 2-1. And this marks, Bosco's second out-of-state game, and then taking on number 46th ranked St. John's team. They're a formidable opponent. They score a lot of points, but they also give up a lot of points. So, their defense is giving up about 28 per game. Their offense is scoring 40 a game. So, and their lone loss came to the hands of Concord de La Salle a couple weeks ago, 35-31. And in that game, de La Salle had to rally down. They were down 17 points and had to come back to win. So that gives you tells you St. John's is not they're a solid ball club. So we'll see if they have enough to handle the Braves. But I'm not so sure that they have enough defense to stop them for to get the win. And then obviously Bosco's defense is going to hold up, and I think that ended up going to be the difference.
All right. Well, that's going to be an interesting game as well. Bosco going cross country second time. Not easy for a high school team to do that by any means. And I wanted to come back and circle around back to San Clemente did, in fact, last year in the playoffs, they did beat that Heritage team, and that was a pretty close game, 23-19. Heritage had beaten El Toro earlier in the playoffs, and that was the first round of the playoffs, 42-14. So that gives you an idea. That San Clemente team was obviously very good last year. So that Orange Lutheran game against Heritage is a very, very good game. Well, Scotty, hey, as we end up this show here on the Trinity League Football Podcast, and we thank all the fans for joining us and listeners, as we promised, Scotty, give us your rundown of the most physical teams in the Trinity League from what you've seen so far. I know you've seen a bunch of these teams.
Yeah, so basically, we were talking about how close everybody is, with the exception of, modern-day Bosco being, we're going to give them the one nod for that physicality. But we were trying to, we were talking about splitting hairs, and everyone's so close. And we know all Trinity Leagues are physical and bruising, but sometimes, you just kind of have to take that extra look to see who is a little bit more physical nature and imposing. And right now, I have Santa Margarita as the next team beneath that, and they have Caden Fitch, Peters, McCartan, and Killander, and those guys are the most opposing guys that bring the hat every time that I have seen this year, and they actually have, they're all combined for like 12 sacks. The next team that I would have is Servite, and Servite's, with Christensen, Spencer Lionel, Caden Fuller, Armoroso, the linebacker John Barajas, who has 3 sacks, the Fitzgerald brothers, who are combined for 7 sacks, and believe it or not, Servite has 16, leads the Trinity League with 16 sacks. And Servite's always been physical too, but I've just seen those guys have brought the hat consistently all year long. And then the next team I would have is Jay Serra, and of course it's going to be Malik McLean. He's got 6 sacks. You got Sean Nelson, TJ Medina, and Victor Clanton, and they combined for 10 sacks. And I know I'm just speaking defense here, but we're just speaking, more from a physical standpoint. And then bringing up, the rear here, we have Orange Lutheran, and Orange Lutheran, as I mentioned, Jackson Cloyd and Zach Brogdon, their 2 stud linebackers are the heart and soul probably of their defense. And and at this point, Orange Lu only has 3 sacks. And when you look at them, they're not imposing up front. They're very small up front on both sides of the line, and we had talked about that early on. And they've able to play with all of these teams, and basically it's been these teams that have been 1-14. They haven't been very physical. And when they took on Norco, and Norco isn't the same Norco as before, and so you could just see it. And I wanted, I love their offense and I like their skill players, but when it comes down to being downright physical, they're not as physical as these other 5 teams. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. So we kind of give, kind of look at it from a different aspect. And I know, Orange Lutheran's probably saying, well, we're physical. Well, great, go out and be physical. But that's just what, I've have seen over the course of the 4 weeks.
So those are your rankings of physicality, just on defense or just in general?
Just in, I use defense as a gauge. If you really want, it kind of goes both. It kind of goes both ways, because even if I gauge the offense, it kind of works out the same way.
Okay.
Jay Serra and Servite, I might be able to flip them out, because the Jay Serra might be a little bit more imposing on offense because of their Munar, McLean, and Fisher, because those 2 guys are physical on offense. And then Santa Margarita has Maynard's physical presence. So those guys all on offense, but then Olu doesn't have anybody other than Ford that's a physical presence. So,
and these are,
there you go.
And we're not ranking Mater Dei and St. John Bosco, just the next group.
Yes, the next group, yeah, because they're both of them on a physicality. Their level is easy. I mean, if you want to have the breakdown, there's Solo, there's Mace, there's Logaleo, Falio, Zion, Genova, Dubar, Talamanca. Those are the most imposing guys on Mater Dei's defense. And then Bosco has Aubrey, Woodby, Kendron Williams, Goforth, South Spina, Fumata. And those are their guys on their defense. But by far and away, they're the two most physically imposing. So,
well, we'll have to keep those rankings in mind, like you said, as the season plays out and how it finishes out. These will be. We'll make sure we jot those down. And remember Scotty's physicality rankings, a new wrinkle to the Trinity League Football Podcast. So good job, Scotty, and great job tonight, man. It was a good show, and you're taking your show on the road this week, huh? You're going up to Santa Clara.
Yeah, taking a little vacay and heading up there for the little 4-day weekend. So
awesome.
Fun.
Well, it'll be great to hear your report on how it goes for as Orange County's #1 show and the nation's #1 show in high school football hits the road there. So I believe I'm going to be at the J. Sarah Losal game on Friday. I'm looking forward to that. I don't think I'm going to cover Mission Viejo for the 3rd week in a row. I think Steve Fryer is going to arm wrestle me for that one. So I think I'll be seeing that one. But that Orange Lutheran game sounds very intriguing as well. So and then obviously with Bosco having a great game. So it's a lot to talk about. So, Scotty, good job tonight. Great talking to you.
As always, Dan. As always.
All right, and thanks again to Scott Barajas, our Trinity League insider. And thanks for you for listening and sharing some time with us on the Trinity League Football Podcast.